What's going on, guys? So I thought it was important for me to make this video here today because there seems to be some baseball fans that aren't really there with their baseball history. They're a little confused as to what has been happening here in the last 3 decades of baseball. So I'm here to educate you guys. Primarily, I'm here to talk about my Miami Marlins. That's right, my Miami Marlins, formerly my Florida Marlins. Now, why am I bringing up the fact that they were the Florida Marlins once? It's because the Miami Marlins, the Marlins franchise, has made the MLB postseason for the first time since 2003. Yeah, 17 years. Okay, the last time that they made the playoffs, they won the World Series. They've only made the postseason twice, both times winning the World Series. This is important to remember. Okay, so write it down somewhere as I keep going. So, Marlins in the postseason for the first time in 17 years, first time since 2003, and they not only get into the playoffs, but then they go and they upset a team that has all this playoff experience in the Chicago Cubs. I mean, you want to talk about the miraculous 2016 Chicago Cubs. That same core group of guys are still together, and all of a sudden they can't beat a team full of nobodies. They can't even win a game against them. So, knowing me, of course, like I always do, I like to talk. When my teams are doing good, I'm going to talk. I like to talk a lot. So, as I'm talking, people now are getting upset. They're getting their feelings hurt that my Marlins, a team that is not supposed to be in the MLB postseason, is still in the MLB postseason, and they're beating teams like the Cubs, and they're upsetting teams like the Phillies, and they're having better years than teams like the Red Sox. Why am I making this video? Well, it's because as I'm talking, people are bringing up unvalid points here. They're talking about, oh, the Marlins are these bottom feeders that don't deserve to be on the same field. They've been losing for 17 years. All they know how to do is lose. They talk about the Marlins as if they were one of the worst franchises ever, which if you go by wins and losses, they are. But are they really as bad as what their record shows? And I'm going to break it down for you here in this video, so check this out. Let's first start with a little bit of background information on my Marlins. The Marlins franchise began in 1993. Look at those beautiful teal uniforms. If that stadium looks familiar, it is because that is what is now known as Hard Rock Stadium, which is the Dolphin Stadium, which is then known as Joe Robbie Stadium, or as the true Marlins fans call it, it is Pro Player Stadium. That is its true name. Don't call it by anything else. That is Pro Player Stadium. In just 4 short years, the Marlins were able to claim their first World Series title against the Cleveland Indians. Mind you, this was the Indians team that had Hall of Famer Jim Thome, Hall of Famer Orel Hershiser, arguably the most swagged out baseball player in the history of the game. Manny Ramirez would have been a Hall of Famer if he wasn't caught on the juice, and arguably one of the best 3 defensive shortstops in the history of the game in Omar Vizquel. Like, the Marlins took that team down. Who did the Marlins have? Nobody even worth noting. I mean, you want to bring up Gary Sheffield before his prime? Sure. Bobby Bonilla, who's known more for his contract than his actual playing career? Sure. Moises Alou, I guess I want to bring that name up because he will be mentioned later on in this video. And then Edgar Renteria, I guess I should show him some love. He is from my homeland of Colombia, actually from the same city as I'm from in Barranquilla. But he also got the game-winning hit, the walk-off hit in Game 7 to pretty much seal the deal. Anyways, after this season, the Marlins would not reach the postseason again until 2003. This was a special year for the Marlins. I don't even think they were expecting to win, but they did get contributions from 2 rookies that I'm sure they were high on, but probably weren't expecting to get what they got from these 2. And that was Dontrell Willis, the D-Train, and arguably the best right-handed hitter of all time, Miguel Cabrera. We didn't know that then, but we know that now. Can't talk about that 2003 team without mentioning what's arguably the greatest catcher of all time, Ivan Rodriguez, known as Pudge. We all know how great he was, and we were able to, give him his only World Series title there. But other than that, not really anyone worth mentioning at this point. There was still a bunch of nobodies. Mike Lowell was not Mike Lowell. Derek Lee was not Derek Lee. Juan Pierre was not Juan Pierre. I mean, you're talking about a group of guys that weren't really anybody. Josh Beckett was not Josh Beckett. He became Josh Beckett in this 2003 season. Let's talk about how this postseason went down. So the Marlins claimed the wild card spot in 2003, and they faced off against the reigning NL champions, the San Francisco Giants, led by the greatest baseball player of all time, Barry Bonds. And they pulled off the upset. The Giants had won over 100 games this season, and the Marlins actually beat them in 4 games. They then played the Chicago Cubs. Now, this series is very, very famous. If you weren't around at that time or weren't following baseball at that time, the Chicago Cubs had yet to reach a World Series since 1945. They had yet to win a World Series since 1908. So this was a big deal. They were playing the wimpy little Marlins. And they had guys like Sammy Sosa, like before mentioned Moises Alou. They had a 1-2 punch that was very tough to beat in Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood. They had the former manager of the San Francisco Giants just a year prior, took him to the World Series, in Dusty Baker. So everyone just assumed that the Cubs would take down the Marlins, and of course that did not happen. This, by the way, was the original 3-1 choke. They were up 3-1. They lost Game 5 in Miami. It went back to Chicago. They were up 3-0, and then we all know what happened after that. Look at that play there by Moises Alou, and that wonderful man with the turtleneck and glasses. His name is Steve Bartman. It is who the players blamed for losing that series. Fast forward to the World Series, the Marlins take down the mighty New York Yankees, and their now CEO, Derek Jeter, look at him, what a dork, to claim their second World Series title in franchise history. Now, the following 17 years were filled with a lot of disappointment. I mean, you're talking about the Hesop Choi Marlins, Hanley Dan Ugla Marlins, the Jose Reyes Ozzie Guillen Marlins, the Stanton Fernandez Yelich Realmuto Ozuna Marlins. None of it worked. None of it worked until this year. Now, do the Marlins make the playoffs in a 162-game season? I would think not. We already know that they would not have made the playoffs under the original format. Of course, this year it was expanded from 5 teams per league into 8 teams per league. But here we are. They made the playoffs. Now that we know what we need to know about the Marlins, wow, that was a tongue twister, it's time to show you why my Marlins franchise is actually more successful than yours. Get ready to get your feelings hurt. Now, remember, the Marlins franchise began in 1993. It's only fair that we judge them based off of that. So let's go real quick. In their 28-year history, the Marlins have won 2 World Series championships. This is already more championships than the Seattle Mariners, than the Tampa Bay Rays, than the Colorado Rockies, than the Milwaukee Brewers, than the Texas Rangers, than the San Diego Padres, than the Arizona Diamondbacks, then the Anaheim/Los Angeles Angels. Yes, that's including Mike Trout, who's never won a playoff game. The Houston Astros, and the reigning defending champs, the Washington Nationals. So already the Marlins have more rings than a handful of franchises. But hold on, like we said, the Marlins franchise didn't start until 1993. So again, it's not really fair that we compare their titles to teams that have been around since the early 1900s. So why don't we take a look at how many teams have won less titles than the Marlins since their inaugural year in 1993? Now, this will hurt some of your guys' feelings. Let's check out this list. The Arizona Diamondbacks, the Atlanta Braves, the Baltimore Orioles, the Chicago White Sox, the Chicago Cubs, the Cincinnati Reds, the Cleveland Indians, the Colorado Rockies, the Detroit Tigers, the Houston Astros, the Kansas City Royals, the Anaheim/Los Angeles Angels. They were even once known as the California Angels. And again, Mike Trout hasn't even won a playoff game with this franchise. This was a big one. The Los Angeles Dodgers. Yeah, the very popular Los Angeles Dodgers have won 0, and I mean 0 titles since the Marlins franchise began. The Milwaukee Brewers, the Minnesota Twins, the New York Miracle Mets, the Oakland A's, the Philadelphia Phillies, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the San Diego Padres, the Seattle Mariners, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Texas Rangers, the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Washington Nationals. Now, for those of you doing the math at home, only the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, and the San Francisco Giants have more World Series titles in that span than my Marlins franchise. In fact, the Marlins have just as many World Series titles as the St. Louis Cardinals in that span. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that one. How funny is it that when you think of the NL East, you think of the Atlanta Braves dominance, you think of Mets, you think Phillies, you think Nationals and Marlins historically as the bottom feeders in that division. Not so much the Nationals over the last 10 years or so, but for the most part they have been considered bottom feeders. But ironically enough, do you know what franchise in that division has the most World Series titles since 1993? Yeah, that's right. It's the Marlins. Wow. Now, if you're listening to this thinking, yeah, well, my team is constantly in the playoffs and the Marlins never are, isn't the point to win championships? And just curious, do you even remember where you were the last time that your team won a World Series? Like, were you even alive? Like, just look at this. I mean, you're talking about the Dodgers, last time 1988. Where were you in 1988? The Mets, 1986. Where were you in 1986? Braves, 1995. And I'm picking up these franchises because they have a pretty substantial fan base. How are you going to bash on a team because they don't make the playoffs, yet they have more World Series titles than your team? Whew. Straight facts right there. That's enough for one day, though. Just remember, before you start bashing my Marlins, just keep that in mind. Before you start bashing them about their playoff appearances, before you start bashing them because they lose all the time, just remember that since their existence, they probably have more World Series championships than your franchise. Ouch. I'm out.